Bikini Bottom is a hidden underwater realm, made sentient by nuclear testing and mutations, or something else. To prove this, I've revisited the most mysterious episodes, and believe me, the clues were everywhere. Bikini Bottom's name isn't very kid-friendly if you think about it for too long. It's almost too sexy for a kids show, which is actually one of the main reasons I think the bottom the show actually refers to is the depths of Bikini Atoll. Now, if you're not familiar with Bikini Atoll, between 1946 and 1958, 23 of the world's most massive nuclear devices were detonated here, both atmospheric and underwater. The tests were supposedly conducted to understand the effects of nuclear weapons on naval ships and the environment. I believe there might have been another reason. The whole situation was a bit over the top, if you ask me, leaving the area uninhabitable for decades, just for some tests. Of course, this lingering and initial radioactivity is what sparked fan theories that the Spongebob SquarePants cast might have evolved intelligence or sentience because of it. But let's get something straight before we continue. I'm not here to prove that the nuclear explosions caused sea life to become sentient IRL, but rather that the show's producers used it as inspiration. Although, thus far, they're still tight-lipped on the subject. Even though the evidence is pretty much conclusive. Firstly, a lot of the aquatic characters in Bikini Bottom have some pretty strong similarities to the marine life you'd find at Bikini Atoll. Take SpongeBob SquarePants, for example. He's a sea sponge, just like those you'd see clinging to the coral reefs around the atoll. Then there's Patrick Star, who's a starfish, another creature that's all over the Pacific Ocean's coral environments. And while Squidward tentacles might be called a squid, he actually looks more like an octopus, which is another native species to the waters around Bikini Atoll. Mr. Krabs is, well, a crab, and you can definitely find plenty of those scuttling around the shallow waters and reefs of the area. Even Pearl Krabs, Mr. Krabs' daughter, fits the bill as a whale, since whales often migrate through the Pacific, including the waters near Bikini Atoll. I could go on about the biological proof, but this next part is gonna blow your mind. Geographically, Bikini Bottom's position is accurate, and this is proven at least 2 times. The first time is in the episode Pranks-A-Lot, where Sandy rockets out of the ocean in her nut ship and heads back to Texas, coming from the west. If you check out a map, you'll see that the Pacific Ocean is actually to the west of Texas, which lines up with where Bikini Atoll is located. Still not convinced? Just watch the scene in the 2004 SpongeBob SquarePants movie, where SpongeBob sings and they do a massive zoom out. It all starts to make sense. See? Okay, it's a little bit off, but that globe also looks like it was in an accident, to be fair. But apart from geographical and biological evidence, there's even more evidence. And this, I find the most compelling. There are loads of explosions in Bikini Bottom, but on its own, that doesn't mean much, until you look closer. Let's look at a few example episodes.
Uh-oh.
See that explosion that the creators use every time? What if I told you that that is a stock footage explosion from the Baker test of Operation Crossroads, specifically from Bikini Atoll? That's right, they actually use Bikini Atoll nuclear explosion footage multiple times in the series. People who think that's not clear-cut proof that Bikini Bottom is based on Bikini Atoll might just be deliberately ignoring the obvious. But still, how does that fit into the life of the aquatic people of Bikini Bottom? Could it really have led to their sentience? One episode in particular might have the answer to this. In the Feral Friends episode from season 10, some weird stuff happens, even weirder than usual. But beneath this layer of weirdness is a foundation of truth we have to look at more closely. A big shiny green rock rises out of a nearby volcano and is seen floating in the sky, which we later learn is called Neptune's moon. Now, whether this is some kind of radioactive substance left over from the bombs, I do not know. But this thing turns all the sentient sea creatures back into their natural states. Basically, dumb fish. However, this only lasts for about 2 hours. What I realized from this is actually quite revealing. If they can revert to their original states, this means that the life in Bikini Bottom must have evolved to become sentient at some point and weren't just like that from the start. Even stranger is that Sandy the squirrel isn't affected by this, even though she is a sentient animal herself. But this could be attributed to the fact that she's a land mammal from Texas and was nowhere near the nuclear tests when they happened. This seems to be a strong argument for the nuclear theory, but there's one big problem: the timeline. Because Neptune's moon is known to come around every 100 years, and the first actual nuclear testing at Bikini Atoll only happened in 1946. Apart from the glowy rock that's known to rise once a century, there are more issues that go against the nuclear mistake theory. Throughout the series, Bikini Bottom is shown to have a history and prehistory that goes much, much further back than the Cold War. Take the episode also known as Spongebob BC, from Season 3, for example. This episode focuses entirely on the prehistoric era of Bikini Bottom. It features characters like Spongegar, prehistoric Spongebob, Patar, prehistoric Patrick, and Squog, prehistoric Squidward, as they try to create fire. Now, people who really want the nuclear mistake theory to be true are saying things like Bikini Bottom runs in a different timeline than the real world, and the Bikini Bottom Stone Age began shortly after the Bikini Atoll nuclear explosions. I'm not sure about that. In my opinion, prehistoric Bikini Bottom is a real thing. The episodes set there clearly show prehistoric fauna, like ammonites and trilobites, that set the episode at 252 million years ago at the latest. Yet the primitive sponges, sea stars, and octopus shown are clearly much more evolved than their real-life counterparts. So, in other words, 252 million years ago in Bikini Bottom, sentient sea creatures already existed. The nuclear tests had nothing to do with it. Which brings me to my nuclear theory, which I 100% believe to be correct, by the way. I think we got all the nuclear clues backwards. In the fictional world of SpongeBob SquarePants, the Bikini Atoll nuclear test bombs didn't create SpongeBob and his friends, but were actually meant to eradicate their civilization. This makes the most sense because, yes, we got the location and species right for the area, and even have the usage of the actual Bikini Atoll explosions in multiple episodes to prove the connection. This also aligns with the timeline suggesting they have been sentient for millions of years, and it contradicts the idea that nuclear mutation could cause such a change. The Feral Friends episode suggests that there is something more mystical about the existence of the creatures in Bikini Bottom. Something more magical than scientific, especially with the glowing rock being called Neptune's moon. Even more intriguing, in the DVD extras of the first SpongeBob SquarePants movie, there's a clip that explains that marine biologists have been studying the advancements of Bikini Bottom for decades, trying to figure out the secret to their intelligence. I guess it led to nothing. Because you know what the US government does with things they don't understand? They blow it the fuck up. And here's the kicker: if my theory is true, Bikini Bottom doesn't exist anymore. They're all gone, man. Every single episode happens before those big explosions, before 1946. That's the real nuclear mistake. Just think about it: the clothing, the society, the lack of tech, and even the cheap price of Krabby Patties. It much more accurately reflects life in the 40s than today, or even the 90s. Or maybe I'm just reading too much into all of this. Let me know in the comments if you think I'm crazy and just seeing things, or if I'm onto something.